What if I told you that a single mouth could both build an empire and destroy it? That a man could rise from nothing, craft a global legend with nothing but his words, and then, with one careless speech, summon the downfall of everything he had built? This is not mythology. It is the real story of Jack Ma. Once a poor English teacher in Hangzhou, he became the founder of Alibaba, the largest e-commerce platform in China. The face of China's entrepreneurial miracle, he was the billionaire who inspired millions, the storyteller who captivated entire stadiums with his voice. But then, almost overnight, he vanished. The empire he created was humbled. His financial arm, Ant Group, had its record-breaking IPO frozen. His wealth collapsed by billions, and his voice, the very thing that made him, was silenced. Why? Because of one speech. Because of one moment when his mouth spoke out of frequency with the system he lived in. Tonight, we dive into Jack Ma's story, not through economics or politics, but through frequency, numerology, and mystical symbolism. We will explore how his life path number, his mouth, and his words aligned with destiny. We will see why his downfall was inevitable, and why, in that downfall, he found his true purpose. Jack Ma was born on September 10, 1964. If you add up the digits, 1091964, you get 30, and 30 equals 3. This makes Jack Ma a life path number 3. In numerology, 3 is the number of communication, creativity, expression, and inspiration. It is the vibration of storytellers, teachers, performers, and visionaries. Those who walk with the number 3 are gifted with charisma. They have the ability to turn words into bridges, to transform ideas into movements. They can inspire, persuade, and captivate. Think about Jack Ma's rise. He was not a programmer. He was not a banker. He was not even a businessman at the start. He was a teacher of English, a man with a story. And with that story, with that tongue, he convinced investors, rallied employees, and inspired a nation to believe in e-commerce before it even existed. That is the power of number 3. The mouth becomes the wand, the voice becomes the spell. But every number carries a shadow. For the 3, the gift of speech also carries the curse of karmic words. The mouth that inspires can also offend. The tongue that builds can also cut. The voice that creates harmony can also summon chaos. Jack Ma lived the duality of number 3. His rise was fueled by words, and his fall also began with words. Let us return to the image of Alibaba and the 40 thieves. In that tale, there is a hidden cave of treasure, and the only way to open it is through a spell. Open sesame. The treasure is unlocked not by force, not by wealth, not by power, but by words. Jack Ma's story mirrors this. His empire was not opened by technology alone. It was opened by his mouth, his charm, his endless storytelling. His speeches became the open sesame of the 21st century. With his mouth, he convinced venture capitalists who thought China was too risky. With his words, he rallied young employees who worked for almost nothing in the early days. With his tongue, he turned Alibaba into the world's largest IPO in 2014, raising $25 billion. His mouth was the key. But in October 2020, at the Bund Summit in Shanghai, that mouth became a blade. Standing before China's financial elite, Jack Ma criticized the government's financial system. He said banks behaved like pawnshops. He ridiculed regulations as outdated. He mocked the very walls that surrounded him. For a number 3, this was the karmic trap. His need to express, to shock, to provoke, it carried him beyond the boundary of safety. His voice shifted out of frequency with the environment around him. And just like that, the spell backfired. The regulators struck. Ant Group's record-shattering IPO was frozen. Investigations began. Alibaba was fined billions. Jack Ma disappeared from the public eye. The same mouth that opened the treasure now sealed it shut. The same tongue that built the empire now summoned its downfall. To understand why this collapse was inevitable, we must look deeper into the frequencies at play. Jack Ma himself carried the vibration of 3: expression, creativity, inspiration, but also volatility in speech. Alibaba, founded in 1999, reduces to the number 1, the number of pioneers, leaders, and blazing stars. Number 1 energy seeks to dominate, to innovate, to be first. And the nation of China resonates with the number 4, the number of order, structure, discipline, and control. 4 is the builder, the wall, the fortress. It values stability above chaos, structure above freedom, silence above provocation. Here is the clash. The 3 speaks too freely. The 1 grows too quickly. The 4 enforces silence. When Jack Ma's words, number 3, combined with Alibaba's pioneering ambition, number 1, they created a wave that collided with China's rigid structure. Number 4, the result, destructive interference. In physics, when 2 waves are out of phase, they cancel each other out. In life, when individual frequency and organizational frequency clash with national frequency, the larger system always wins. That is why Jack Ma's empire could not continue its rise unchecked. The frequency of 3 and 1 was too loud, too disruptive, too free, and the frequency of 4, like a wall of stone, absorbed the wave and forced silence. This was not just politics. It was not just economics. It was a universal law of vibration. The name Alibaba itself carries a mystical weight. It comes from the ancient tale of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. In the story, a poor woodcutter discovers a hidden cave filled with treasure. The only way to open the cave is with words. The incantation, "Open Sesame." This is not coincidence. Jack Ma chose this name deliberately because he believed his company would be the key to a hidden treasure. The treasure of the internet, of digital commerce, of connecting millions of small businesses to the world. And just like in the tale, it worked. He spoke the words, and the cave opened. Billions of dollars poured out. A treasure chest of opportunity was revealed. But in the story, there is also danger. Those who misuse the spell are punished. A single wrong word, a single mistake, and the cave can close forever, trapping the treasure or crushing the intruder. Jack Ma lived out that myth. His mouth became the spell that opened the cave of wealth. And later, his mouth became the misstep that closed it. In Buddhist teaching, the tongue is one of the most dangerous instruments of karma. Words cannot be undone. Words create ripples, frequencies that travel outward. They can heal, or they can wound. They can summon fortune, or they can summon ruin. For Jack Ma, the karma of number 3 manifested fully. His empire rose because of his words, and it fell because of them too. The cave opened, the cave closed. But here lies the deeper truth. Jack Ma's downfall was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of his alignment with destiny. After the Bund Summit speech, he disappeared from public life. For months, nobody knew where he was. Rumors swirled. Was he imprisoned? Was he silenced? Was he exiled? The world speculated, but Jack Ma remained hidden. And then, he returned, not as a conqueror, not as the richest man in China, but as something closer to what he always was, a teacher. Jack Ma began appearing in schools, talking to students, discussing education, sharing lessons from his journey. He no longer stood as the boss of an empire, but as a man passing on wisdom. He no longer spoke to dominate markets, but to inspire young minds. And in that transformation, Jack Ma fulfilled the true vibration of the number 3. For the number 3 is not meant to rule. It is not meant to dominate. It is meant to inspire. It is the voice that carries stories. It is the storyteller who plants seeds of imagination in others. It is the teacher who sparks creativity in the next generation. Jack Ma, stripped of power, stripped of status, stripped of his empire's momentum, became exactly that. The collapse forced him back to his essence. The silence forced him to rediscover his true role. The karmic storm pushed him into alignment. This is the paradox. His empire had to fall, so that his soul could rise into its rightful path. Jack Ma's journey teaches us profound lessons in frequency and karma. The first is that words are frequency. They are vibrations that move through the air, strike hearts, and shape reality. Jack Ma created with words, and he destroyed with words. His life proves that the mouth is not just flesh, it is a tuning fork of destiny. The second lesson is that every number has two faces. The number 3 is joy, inspiration, and communication. But its shadow is reckless speech, ego, and verbal chaos. When you live your gift without balance, it turns into a curse. The third lesson is that no frequency exists alone. Jack Ma's 3 was amplified by Alibaba's 1, the pioneer energy. Together, they created a storm of growth. But when those frequencies clashed with China's 4 order, stability, control, the storm was neutralized. The greater wave cancelled the smaller one. The system always absorbs the out-of-phase vibration. And finally, the last lesson is karmic. Collapse is not always punishment. Sometimes collapse is correction. Sometimes downfall is the path to alignment. Jack Ma lost billions, but he gained truth. He lost power, but he found purpose. Jack Ma is no longer the richest man in China. He is no longer the face of global capitalism's promise in Asia. His empire is smaller. His voice more measured. His presence quieter. But look closer. You will see something remarkable. He is now living exactly as a life path 3 should live, as a storyteller, a teacher, a giver of inspiration. He travels. He speaks to students. He shares his wisdom, not to dominate, but to plant seeds. He no longer shouts into stadiums. He whispers into classrooms. And perhaps those whispers will outlast even Alibaba. The story of Jack Ma reminds us that wealth fades, empires crumble, power shifts, but frequency never lies. His mouth was both his blessing and his curse. It built him, it broke him, and finally, it returned him to his destiny. Jack Ma is not the richest man in money anymore, but perhaps he is rich in something greater, the wealth of alignment with his soul's true vibration, the wealth of being exactly what the universe designed him to be. And so we end where we began. A man whose mouth built an empire, a man whose mouth destroyed it, and a man who, in silence, discovered the real reason he was given that mouth in the first place: to inspire, to teach, to tell the story.